With the regular season coming to a close and the playoffs on the horizon, I decided to start a new series called Stack or Shed. Now, in this series, we're going to be discussing all the teams that have been eliminated from the playoffs so far, and we're simply going to answer these simple questions. What went wrong in their season? What do they need? Stack or shed, which essentially means do they continue to build with what they have right now, or do they just scrap everything and start all over again? Their draft picks, one move I would do, and their cap space, as well as their free agents, okay? Now, the first two episodes will be fairly lengthy because there's a lot of teams, but after that, we're going to transition into just doing one team per episode. So in this episode, we're going to do the AFC, and then the next episode, we're going to do the NFC. So let's start with the Titans, okay? What went wrong in their season? And I would venture to say it was the lack of playmakers and inexperienced coaching. Now, at first, I was going to say bad coaching, but I don't think Brian Callahan is a bad coach. I just think he bit more than what he can chew. And the reason why I say that is because a lot of times these first time head coaches, when they go into these situations like the Titans or the Giants or the Jaguars or the Cardinals, teams that are going through hard rebuilds, it's a lot to take on. And a lot of times you're not going to be the answer on why that team changes and becomes better. A lot of times you're going to be the sacrificial lamb. And that's exactly what happened. Not to mention, we can all agree that under Brian Callahan's tenure, the Titans did not improve. And in some ways, you could say they were stagnant. So we can't say that he's either a bad coach or a good coach, but instead we can just say that he's a coach that walked into a situation that he couldn't overcome. And that's okay. Now, the other problem that derailed the Titans this season was the lack of playmakers. Now, granted, Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears and Elik Eluemunor were doing their thing, but this was more of a group effort. This wasn't just one person being dominant. Here's the stats of all their playmakers this season. Tony Pollard, 228 rushing attempts for 1,034 rushing yards, 4.5 rushing yards per carry, 5 rushing touchdowns, and had 30 receptions for 189 receiving yards. Tajay Spears, 69 attempts for 265 rushing yards, 3.8 rushing yards per carry, 2 rushing touchdowns, and had 38 receptions for 255 receiving yards. Goziem Aquanu, 74 targets for 54 receptions, 558 receiving yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. Elik Eluemunor, 79 targets for 38 receptions, 465 receiving yards, and 4 receiving touchdowns. Chamiri Dyke, 70 targets for 45 receptions, 396 receiving yards, and 4 receiving touchdowns, as well as 18 rushing yards. Just put that out there. Gunnar Helm, 55 targets for 44 receptions, 357 receiving yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. Van Jefferson, 52 targets for 29 receptions, 350 receiving yards, and 1 receiving touchdown. Calvin Ridley, 36 targets for 17 receptions, and 303 receiving yards. Now, granted, if it wasn't for Cam Ward being the distributor that he is, I think these stats would have been a lot worse. But Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears were doing their thing in certain games. Elik Eluemunor was showing a lot of promise. So I think there is some promise, but at the same time, you need more playmakers. Now, am I saying that you can go out and you can get a dominant wide receiver? No. Because most likely, they're not going to want to go to the Titans because the Titans are going to be winning a lot of games anytime soon. But instead, I think it'll be better if you just draft one. Now, with that being said, let's talk about what do they need. And that is new coaching staff and more playmakers. Now, here are just some of the head coaching candidates that may be available this offseason. Van Joseph, Chris Shula, Jeff Hafley, Matt Nagy, Joe Brady, Robert Saleh, Jesse Minter, Clint Kubiak, Arthur Smith, Kevin Stefanski, maybe even Mike McDaniels. Now, out of those candidates, realistically speaking, who would you really want? Because me personally, I would say maybe Clint Kubiak or maybe Kevin Stefanski, maybe Arthur Smith, because right now you need an offensive head coach for Cam Ward's development. I understand that Van Joseph has done well this year. Chris Shula, Jeff Hafley, Joe Brady, Robert Saleh, Jesse Minter. I understand they've all done well, but I want Clint Kubiak. If you put Clint Kubiak with Cam Ward, I guarantee you this offense will look a whole lot better next season than what they have been the last 2 or 3 years. And if you don't believe me, look at the Bears. This time last year, the Bears offense was either the worst or close to being the worst offense. Now look at them. You could consider them to be a top 5, maybe a top 3 offense in the entire league right now. And that's from just making one move. If you're the Titans, That's all you need to do. You get Clint Kubiak, I guarantee you things are going to be a whole lot better. You're going to see production out of people that you wouldn't have expected. Now, with that being said, the question we all need to ask ourselves is stack or shed? Now, me personally, I said stack. And the reason why I say that is because you have some pieces. All you have to do is continue to build off of it. And you can continue to build off of it by making the most important decision that you need to make, which is hiring the right head coach. If you do that, I guarantee you everything else will fall into place. Now, with that being said, you have 9 picks in next year's draft. You have your first, your second, your third, your fourth. You have 2 5th-round picks, 2 6th-round picks, and a 7th-round pick. Now, the one move I would do is draft a wide receiver. Now, I know there's a lot of people that are already turned off, but just hear me out for a second. I understand that most people will say, oh, the Titans need to draft Arvell Reese or Sonny Styles or this high-end pass rusher. No. You need to surround Cam Ward with weapons. Productive weapons, to be specific. You can get someone like a Mekhi Lemon, a Carnell Tate, a Denzel Boston, just to name a few. I think if you add one of those wide receivers, this offense goes from being a mediocre offense to a really good average to slightly above average offense. And I think that's good. Now, when we look at their cap situation for next year, they're going to have $114.9 million, which is fairly good. I feel like they could probably have a little bit more if they make a few different moves. Maybe get rid of Calvin Ridley, maybe restructure a few deals and whatnot, maybe some extensions, who knows. But when we look at their free agents, you have Kevin Zeitler, Arden Key, Sebastian Joseph, Van Jefferson, Brandon Allen, Johnny Hecker, Morgan Cox, Jihad Ward, Joey Sile, James Lynch, just to name a few. So honestly speaking, could you bring back some of these free agents? Sure. Are you in a rush to bring them back? Not really. I mean, Kevin Zeitler, I don't know if he still wants to play. If he does, you can bring him back for a cheap deal. Same thing with Arden Key. Same thing with Sebastian Joseph. Van Jefferson, you can just let him walk. Brandon Allen, you can let him walk. Johnny Hecker, you can let him walk. Honestly speaking, there's certain parts in this team where you can get cheaper. And then there's other parts where you may have to invest a little bit more money. Now, am I saying you got to just, spend a boatload of money in the first round of free agency? No. But at the same time, if there's somebody that you really prioritize, that you want to make sure that they don't hit free agency, just lock them up right now. Now, on to the Colts. The two things that I believe that went wrong in their season were injuries and losing too many games. Because there was a point in time where I believed that they were the best team in the entire league because they were just killing teams left and right. Defensively, they were dominant. Offensively, they were putting up crazy numbers. Jonathan Taylor at one point looked like an MVP or Offensive Player of the Year candidate. And there were even points where I believe that Daniel Jones probably could have been an MVP as well. Now, I know I could have been, drinking from the cup a little bit, but that's how dominant they were playing. And then to just see them just fall off a cliff like how they have been the last few weeks is just crazy to me. But at the same time, this is what happens year after year with a lot of these teams. They come out guns blazing, and then once we get to the key points of the season, they just fall off. It happens all the time. Now, with that being said, when we talk about injuries, however, I know injuries is a part of football, but it's key injuries that I believe that cause the team not to win as many games. Specifically, Daniel Jones. Once Daniel Jones went down, their season was essentially over in my book. Because I believe no matter who they bring in, they're not going to be able to replicate that same momentum that they had with Daniel Jones. They couldn't use Anthony Richardson because he was still on IR. Riley Leonard is not proven. Who else could they go to? I know. They're going to call Phillip Rivers. The same Phillip Rivers that hasn't played football in over 5 years. Because they believe that by getting Phillip Rivers, he's going to bring stability back into this team. Which I don't blame them for because at that time, they still had a chokehold within their division. They were one of the best teams in the AFC. He's familiar with Shane Steichen's system. He's familiar with some of the players on this team, so it's a no-brainer. However, this move was done at a time where they were going to start facing a lot of their tougher opponents on the schedule. They were going to start facing teams like the Seahawks and company who have really dominant defenses. So I don't hate the Colts for making the move. It's just, it sucks to see that they made all of these moves this offseason and they were off to a really good start just for them not to make it in the playoffs. But at the same time, this isn't a race. This is a marathon. With that being said, I believe the Colts should continue to stack. And the reason why I say that is because right now you have a lot of good pieces on your team. There's no need for you to get rid of them. You've already made a significant investment at corner by giving up 2 first-round picks to get Sauce, so there's no need for you to just get rid of people. All you have to do is just address the few holes that are on this team, and I guarantee you, you're right back into being playoff contenders next year. Guaranteed. Because let's be honest here. If Daniel Jones doesn't get hurt, I guarantee you they would have at least fought to the end to possibly make it into the playoffs. With that being said, I believe the Colts should continue to stack. And the reason why I say that is because you have to continue to let this thing play out. Because for all intents and purposes, next year could be the year where they make that crazy playoff run. Or better yet, win the Super Bowl. They're not in a bad spot. All they have to do is just address the few holes that are on this team, and they're right back to being playoff contenders. Now, with that being said, they have 5 to 7 draft picks, depending on, comp picks and whatnot. So, of course, they don't have their first. They have their second, their third, their fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh. Now, with the draft not being an offensive heavy draft class, I think the Colts could possibly trade up into the first round. Because I believe, and this is just my personal opinion, and I know I have to talk about it, and I probably will either do a full episode or at least half an episode talking about the draft and my views about the draft. But I truly believe that a lot of teams are going to trade out of the first round because 26 isn't the draft class that people need to be worried about. It's 27. Because in 27, you could possibly have Archie Manning, Lenora Sellers, Jeremiah Smith, Ryan Williams. I could continue to go down the list. You could potentially have 5 to maybe 7 quarterbacks that may be drafted within the first 3 rounds. Now, I understand that the draft is a coin flip, and I understand that there's a chance that a player might do great or bad, but at the same time, I heard a lot of people going into this season say the 26 draft class is going to be really good because Drew Aller is going to be there, Lenora Sellers might be there, Archie might be there, the list goes on and on. But in actuality, it hasn't panned out well. A lot of people have either hit the transfer portal or just gone back to school, and a lot of people haven't played well. So when you factor all those things in, 26 is not the draft class you need to be worried about. It's the 27 draft class. Look at what the Rams, Cowboys, and Jets are going to do. Keep your eye on that because we're going to be talking about that moving forward. Now, one move I would do if I was the GM for the Colts, I would draft a right tackle. Now, I know there's a lot of people that are probably saying, why are you so obsessed with the offensive line? Offensive line this, offensive line that, offensive line. Hear me out, okay? Braden Smith is going to be a free agent. Are you really going to bring back Braden Smith when his market value, according to Spotrac, is $13.8 million? When you know you're going to have to give a big deal to Daniel Jones, and you know you're going to have to pay Michael Pittman Jr., and you know you're going to have to pay Jonathan Taylor a lot of money? No, you're not going to do that. You're going to go cheap at right tackle. Not to mention, there's a few good prospects at right tackle. Spencer Fanu. There's a right tackle from Miami. You could have some potential really good right tackles that come out of next year's draft class. I would make that move compared to just paying Braden Smith a boatload of money. And this is no shot at Braden Smith at all, but sacrifices are going to have to be made. Now, with that being said, when we look at their cap for next season, they're going to have $54.2 million. Now, can they create a little bit more? Yes, of course. Anybody can do that. They can do some restructures, cut a few people, move some money around, same old, okay? So I'm not really worried about that. Now, when we talk about their free agents, like I just said, you're going to have Braden Smith, Daniel Jones, Samson Abukum, Kwity Paye, Mo Alley Cox, Danny Pinter, Alec Pierce, Jermaine Pratt, Neville Gilmore, Nick Cross, Jacob Phillips, just to name a few. Now, out of all of those names, realistically speaking, who do you think they're going to bring back? You know they're going to bring back Daniel Jones. Alec Pierce is most likely going to come back. Nick Cross, maybe Kwity Paye, maybe Mo Alley Cox for tight end depth. They don't have a lot of top end people that they have to pay a lot of money to. But at the same time, there's a chance that Jonathan Taylor may want more money. There's a chance that maybe this person may hold out or that person may hold out. So only time will tell. But I do believe that the Colts are in a really good spot. And I do believe that they'll be back to being playoff contenders next season. Now let's talk about the Raiders. So what went wrong in their season? Bad coaching, lack of talent, and bad roster construction. So let's start with bad coaching. I understand that Pete Carroll is a player's coach, and I understand there's a lot of players that love him, but I never believed that the Raiders players bought into what Pete Carroll was trying to sell them. Now, if this was a few years ago, this Raiders team would be all in on what Pete Carroll is trying to sell them. But nowadays, I feel like Pete Carroll's message has gone stale. I believe that just the very aura that Pete Carroll used to have has withered away. And that's okay. But what you can't do is bring in Chip Kelly and make him your offensive coordinator and think this is going to work. It wasn't going to work. It was not going to work, folks, okay? Let's really be honest here. Did you really think that Chip Kelly was going to be this innovating mastermind for this offense? No. Let me just read to you some stats just to back this up, okay? They had the 32nd ranked offense, and they averaged 14.2 points per game, 247.8 yards per game, 4.5 yards per play, and 25 touchdowns. Now, if you break that down by passing offense and rushing offense, they were 27th in passing offense, and they averaged 172.8 passing yards per game, 5 passing yards per play, and 20 passing touchdowns. They were dead last in rushing offense, and they averaged 74.9 rushing yards per game, 3.6 rushing yards per play, and 5 rushing touchdowns. 5 rushing touchdowns. They just drafted Ashton Genty, and all you could do was get 5 rushing touchdowns. Put a bookmark on that for a moment, okay? When we go a little bit deeper with some advanced stats, okay? Their offensive explosive pass rate was 12.7%. Their offensive explosive run rate was 8.6%. They have 108 red zone plays for 18 red zone touchdowns. Now, when we look at their defense, okay, they allowed a 14.6% defensive explosive pass rate. They allowed a 9.8% defensive explosive run rate. They allowed 214 red zone plays and also allowed 37 red zone touchdowns. Could you blame this on the players? Yes. Could you blame this on the coaching staff? Yes. But I feel like a lot of the attention needs to go towards the front office. Because what you have built is not sustainable. And what you have currently needs to just be shredded. Now, I understand Raiders fans, you probably don't want to hear that because you're tired of going through rebuild after rebuild after rebuild after rebuild. But you really need to just scrap with what you have. Because what you have right now is not sustainable. Now, I understand that's probably not the best move, but it's the most necessary move. Now, the good news is you're going to have a lot of picks. You could potentially have 8 to 10 picks depending on the comp pick system, all right? So, of course, you're going to have your first, your second, your third. You're going to have 2 fourth-round picks, a 5th, a 6th, and a 7th, okay, which is good. Now, the one move I would do, and I know Raiders fans, you probably have all said this as well, I'm moving off of Max Crosby. I understand that the fan base loves him and he loves the fan base, but this relationship isn't working. They haven't gone anywhere since he's been with the team. Now, sure, they've had a few different spurts where the team is playing really good ball and, they're making some noise and whatnot, but they don't have that consistency. They'll have a team that's good for maybe 2 or 3 seasons, and then guess what? They're going through the same cycle all over again, which is what? Being in the top 5 or top 10 range for every single draft. Now, according to Spotrac, if a team trades for Max Crosby, he only has guaranteed money in 26, and that's only $30 million. However, his money in 27 becomes fully guaranteed on March 13th. Now, the Raiders would take on a dead cap this upcoming season of $5.1 million, which they would save $30.7 million. So either way, this is a win-win situation for both sides. Now, the question is this. What's Max Crosby's value right now? Because I believe that his value has diminished a little bit. He's still worth a first-round pick. It's just you could have gotten 2 first-round picks for him if you would have done this in the offseason. Now, the question is this. Who would be willing to trade for Max Crosby? Would it be the Ravens? Would it be the Eagles? Would it be the Cowboys? Because he has a market. Make no mistake about that. He has a market. The question is, will the Raiders be willing to entertain teams? And if so, how long would it take for them to make this move? Now, of course, they're going to have a lot of cap space because they essentially have nobody on their books. They're going to have $121.2 million, which, that's not bad at all, right? But when we look at their free agents, you're going to have Kenny Pickett, Eric Stokes, Landon Roberts, Lonnie Johnson, Raheem Mostert, Dylan Parham, Jamal Adams, Tyler Lockett, Devin White, Zamir White, These aren't really big contracts that you would have to give them, honestly. A lot of these people are either going to retire or just go on to another team, honestly. Would you want to bring back maybe Kenny Pickett? Maybe. Do you want to bring back Jamal Adams or Devin White? Maybe. But I don't think this isn't something where, oh, we have to do something now or we're going to lose him. Like, no, trust me. Now, the question is this: if you're a head coach candidate, would you take this job? Now, I know a lot of people will say, hell yeah, I'll take this job. This isn't Madden, okay? This isn't something where you can just pick this person and pick that person. You can just add them to your team and everything's going to be A-okay and whatnot. No, this is life, okay? But really ask yourself this. Do you believe that if you was to bring in your coaching staff, that you guys would be able to turn this thing around? And then ask yourself this. How quickly can you turn this team around and how quickly can you start winning again? Now, I'm not saying you have one really good season where you're probably like 10-4 or you make it to the second round in the playoffs or whatever. No, I'm talking about consistently winning year after year after year. Okay, now let's talk about the Jets. So, what went wrong in their season? Inconsistent quarterback play, a stagnant offense, and an inconsistent defense. Now, when we look at the stats, okay, they had the 28th ranked offense and they averaged 18.3 points per game, 272.4 yards per game, 4.5 yards per play, and 25 touchdowns. Now, if you break that down, they were dead last in passing offense and they averaged 145.8 passing yards per game, 4.4 passing yards per play, and 14 passing touchdowns. They were seventh in rushing offense and they averaged 126.7 rushing yards per game, 4.7 rushing yards per play, and 11 rushing touchdowns. Now, when we look over to their defense, however, they were 23rd in the league and they allowed 29.3 points per game, 348.4 yards per game, 5.5 yards per play, and 51 touchdowns. They were 16th in pass defense and they allowed 213.4 passing yards per game, 6.7 passing yards per play, and 32 passing touchdowns. They were 27th in run defense and they allowed 135 rushing yards per game, 19 rushing touchdowns, and 4.4 rushing yards per play. Now, this is how the Jets matched up statistically against the league, okay? So they were 29th in success rate at 40.5%. They were 29th in pass EPA at negative 0.182. They were 25th in rush EPA at negative 0.61. They were dead last in red zone touchdown rate at 38.5%. They were dead last in explosive pass play rate at 10.4%. They were 7th in explosive run play rate at 12.2%. They were 28th in third down conversions at 34.6%. And they were 4th in pressure rate faced at 44.9%. Now, defensively, they were 30th in pressure rate at 32.8%. They were 28th in explosive pass play rate allowed at 18.1%. They were 22nd in explosive run play rate allowed at 11.9%. They were 14th in success rate at 43.5%. They were 16th in passing yards allowed per game at 211.1. They were 27th in rushing yards allowed per game at 127.1 and 30th in points allowed per game at 27.5. Now, with that being said, after reading all of those stats, we can all agree that on both sides of the ball, the Jets were just bad. Now, offensively, Justin Fields was just very inconsistent. Outside of that first week, it was just a never-ending roller coaster with him. Now, if you pair that with Garrett Wilson being inconsistent and the run game being the only bright spot on this offense, I don't know what else to tell you. Justin Fields is just not a good quarterback right now. Now, can you blame that on the Bears? Yes. Can you blame that on Pittsburgh? Somewhat. That's a deeper conversation for another day. But the fact of the matter is, he's hurt his reputation more. And at this point, if I'm Justin Fields, I'm looking for a backup role and I just want to learn. I want to refine myself. I want to become a better passer. And I just want to become a better quarterback overall. Now, defensively, I'm not really surprised because they've been inconsistent this entire season. There was never a point where the defense was just a little bit consistent for maybe like 2 to 4 weeks. It was one game they're playing really good, and then the next 2 or 3 games, they're just downright atrocious. And it just kept on happening week after week after week. And it also doesn't help that you trade away Quentin Williams and Sauce Gardner. Now, do I think this team is in a really bad spot and all is lost and you just have to get rid of everything? No. You just have to continue to stack this team. The offensive line is good. The run game is good as long as Breece Hall stays, which I don't think he's going to stay. I think he's probably going to leave. But I think you could bring in another running back and I think everything will be fine. But that's another story for another day, right? I think you have pieces on this team. I just think you have to find a way for everything to fit. And I think once they find everything to fit, I think they're going to be in a really good spot. It's just going to take some time. You have to replace Quentin Williams' spot. You have to replace Sauce Gardner's spot. You have to find a better bridge quarterback than Justin Fields. Now, all of this can be done, but it's just going to take some time. Now, when we look at their draft picks, you're going to have a lot of them, all right? We all know you're going to have 2 first-round picks. We all know you're going to have your second, your fourth, your fifth, your sixth, and your seventh. Now, you could have a little bit more depending on the comp picks, all right? Now, one move I would do if I was the GM for the Jets is find a bridge quarterback. And when I mean find one, I mean find a bridge quarterback. Don't just go after somebody because you like the oohs and ahs. Go after somebody that you know that can win you a few games. You can get someone like a Jacoby Brissett. Shoot, you could just give Tyrod Taylor an extension. Or you get Mac Jones or maybe Kirk Cousins if he wants to join the team and whatnot. You have options, okay? But you have to find a competent bridge quarterback. Do not try to trade up to try to get Fernando Mendoza. You're going to lose that battle. Instead, address other positions of need on this team. And then in 27, you go out and you get your franchise quarterback. Now, when we look at their cap space, they're going to have $99.2 million, which isn't bad at all. So you could be playmakers in free agency, but it's going to be very limited, okay? Now, when we look at their free agents, Andre Cisco, Tyrod Taylor, John Simpson, Quincy Williams, Elijah Vera Tucker, Tony Adams, Josh Reynolds, Isaiah Oliver, Breece Hall, John Mechie, Chris Boyd, Stone Smart, Jelani Woods, just to name a few. Now, you don't have any big ticket free agents, but I feel like you have enough free agents to where you don't have to sign them, but if you value them a lot, then you can just bring them back for the low. Just being honest here, okay? Now let's talk about the Browns. So what went wrong in their season? Inconsistent offensive play calling and execution, lack of offensive weapons, and not winning enough games. Pretty straightforward, right? So when we look at their stats, they had the 30th ranked offense and they averaged 16.2 points per game, 266 yards per game, 4.4 yards per play, and 26 touchdowns. They were 29th in passing offense and they averaged 170.3 passing yards per game, 4.7 yards per play, and 16 passing touchdowns. They were 27th in rushing offense and they averaged 95.7 rushing yards per game, 3.9 rushing yards per play, and 10 rushing touchdowns. Now, from a play calling perspective, Kevin Stefanski has nobody to blame but himself. Because there were points in games where you could have easily won the game, but you decided you wanted to make a boneheaded move. And a lot of times, it costed you that game. There was a point, and I forgot what game it was, where they kept on running the same play over and over again with Quinshon Junkins as quarterback. Why? I don't know. So it's those type of things that are going to cost you games. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Browns fired him this offseason because, let's be honest here, he hasn't done a good job this year. Now, I understand everyone can, have the conspiracy theory of, oh, he doesn't like Shador and all these crazy... Shoot, there was even something where someone trying to make a connection where his wife is apparently the daughter of the reporter who Deion Sanders threw water on like back in the day or whatever. Something crazy, right? It didn't make any sense. But the fact of the matter is the play calling was very inconsistent, and that's probably one of the reasons why they didn't win as many games. Now, from the execution standpoint, you could put some blame on the quarterbacks, but at the same time, they're rookies. My expectations for them are fairly low, but at the same time, they could have executed a few plays a little bit better. But we all know that after one off season, they're going to be a whole lot better. Now, from the lack of weapons perspective, you have to blame that on the front office, okay? Harold Fannin Jr. has been probably one of your most productive offensive weapons outside of Jerry Jeudy. The offensive line has essentially aged out. Your running back room is fairly young. That's not a lot to really hang your hat on. And they have a lot of things that they're going to have to address in this offseason. You're going to have to rebuild the offensive line. You're going to have to bring in more weapons. You're going to have to do different things just so you can make this team a little bit better, because the defense isn't a problem. It's just the offense. If you can find some stability with the offense, I guarantee you this team will be in a better place next season. Now, if you want to compare Shador's stats to all the other quarterbacks in the league, here they are. He is 15th out of 40 quarterbacks specifically in passing yards. He is 35th in completion percentage. He is tied for dead last in passing touchdowns. He is tied for the fourth most interceptions. He is tied for 25th in yards per attempt, and he's 35th in EPA per play. Now, can you blame that on the lack of weapons that he has? Sure. Can you blame that on the play calling? Sure. Could you blame that on a plethora of different things? Yes. But some of the things that Shador did, he didn't need to do. The stuff where he's trying to roll out of the pocket multiple times, you don't need to do that. But at the same time, I know that after one offseason, he's probably not going to do that anymore. A lot of times after that first offseason, players tend to drop bad habits. Now, if they continue on with those bad habits, hey, that's just you and the coaching staff that you deal with, okay? Now, the not winning enough games part, that's pretty self-explanatory. You just have to win more games. That's it. And honestly, that's more directed towards the offense to the defense, because the defense has been holding their own this entire season. It's just the offense that are hit or miss sometimes. That's all. Now, what do they need at this point? Of course, more offensive weapons, a better O-line, and better play calling and execution. Now, do they stack or shed? I would venture to say stack. And the reason why I say that is because you have a foundation. And I think it's a foundation that you can build off of for the next few years, or until you feel like you may want to take a quarterback in 27, because I feel like that's what they're probably going to do. Now, with the draft picks, all right, you have 8 to 9 draft picks. We all know you have 2 first-round picks. You have a second, a third, a fourth. You have 3 fifth-round picks. You have a sixth and 2 seventh-round picks. You have a pretty good amount of draft picks that you can use to really build this team out. So you could address the offensive line with 2 or 3 picks. You can get a few weapons. You could do a plethora of different things. Now, one move I would do, now this may be controversial, but just walk with me, all right? The one move I would do is surround Shador with a competent offense. Now, I know that's very controversial. You probably stopped listening to this. Thank you for listening, okay? But just walk with me for a moment, honestly. I think Shador Sanders has shown enough that you have to ride with him. I understand Dillon Gabriel showed you a little bit of promise, but there's something in Shador that you just have to give him a chance. Because let's be honest here, the only reason why he fell was because of his mouth. If him and Deion Sanders didn't say anything, he would have been drafted in the first round guaranteed. Because there were teams that had him on their board. But because they said, oh, we're not going to go to this team, or, oh, we're only taking interviews if you're drafted at this point and whatnot, everybody was turned off. And they wanted to prove that, listen, you are not bigger than the Shield. The Shield will always be bigger than any other player, whoever you are, whatever your accolades are, whatever your last name is. Now, with that being said, yes, you still want to keep Dillon Gabriel, of course. But if you believe that Shador Sanders is going to take this team to the next level, roll with it. But if you don't believe it, in 27, whatever you need to do, you trade up or you tank or whatever it is, and you get your quarterback, whether that be Archie or Lenore Sellers or whomever. Now, when we look at their cap space, $5.4 million. Yes, I know that's not a lot, but they can do some restructures, move some money around, cut some people, trade some people, and they'll probably have some cap space. Because they've been doing this for I don't know how many years now with Deshaun Watson's contract. Now, when we look at their free agents, Joel Bitonio, Wyatt Teller, David Njoku, Cam Robinson, Ethan Pokich, Shelby Harris, Devin Bush, Tevin Jenkins, Jerome Ford, DeAndre Carter, Jerome Baker, Rashawn Jenkins, Martin Emerson, Cam Thomas, Kendrick Green. Now, out of all those people I just listed, I'm only bringing back a handful. Tevin Jenkins comes to mind, Devin Bush, Shelby Harris, maybe Jerome Ford, maybe David Njoku. But outside of them, everybody else can just go. Test your market. If you go to another team, okay, cool. If you come back, okay, cool. That's it. Because let's be honest here. With multiple players on the defense making a lot of money, you want the offense to be cheap. And the reason why I say that is because take a page out of the Eagles playbook, right? They've invested a lot of money into the offense, but what do they do with the defense? They kept it cheap. They haven't invested a lot of money into it. Now, I understand that they have to pay Jordan Davis soon and Jalen Carter and this person, that person, but out of all those people that they're going to pay, are they really going to pay them market value? Most likely not. Some of them, they're probably going to get traded. Some of them, they're probably just going to let them walk. So I would do that exact same thing if I'm the Browns. Surround Shedeur Sanders or whoever the quarterback is going to be with young, cheap talent and just let them grow. Because the defense is going to be the reason why you're going to continue to win games and possibly go on a playoff run. The offense is just there to maintain whatever lead that you have. Now, I know I could be wrong, but that's just how I view things. Now, let's go to the Bengals. So what went wrong in their season? Bad roster construction, the lack of defensive playmakers and execution, and inconsistent offensive play. Now, when we look at their stats, okay, they had the worst defense in the entire league, and they allowed 29.5 points per game, 392.2 yards per game, 6.3 yards per play, and 51 touchdowns. They were 27th in pass defense, and they allowed 243.3 passing yards per game, 7.2 passing yards per play, and 33 passing touchdowns. They were dead last in run defense, and they allowed 148.9 rushing yards per game, 5.2 rushing yards per play, and 18 rushing touchdowns. Now, are we surprised at these stats? No, because they don't have Sam Hubbard, they don't have Trey Hendrickson, and they don't have a lot of playmakers on that side of the ball. DJ Turner is probably the only bright spot on that defense. Outside of him, who else can you say is a playmaker? Myles Murphy? Jamar Stewart? You know, the person that held out the entire offseason for a contract and then finally gave in? No. Demetrius Knight? No. Who else? But this is what happens when you allocate the money the wrong way. I understand that your three best players are on the offense, but at the same time, you still have the defense. You still got to put some money there. And you didn't do enough on the defensive side. And clearly it shows statistically. Better yet, let's go a little bit deeper, okay? They allowed the most total yards per game at 392.2. They allowed the most passing yards per game at 254. They allowed the most rushing yards per game at 148.9. They allowed the worst explosive pass play rate at 20.1%. And they allowed the worst run play rate at 13%. I'm sorry here, folks. The stats say it all. That defense is historically bad. And I understand they had some spurts where they were playing some really good ball and they were doing their thing. I know the Steelers game, we're not going to talk about that, right? But the fact of the matter is this. If you're the Bengals, you have to start making some investments into the defense. Because if you don't, guess what's going to happen? Joe Burrow is basically going to throw his arm out every single season just so you guys can win 5 or 6 games. Now, that doesn't mean you have to invest a lot of money into that side. You can keep it cheap by just start hitting on your defensive draft picks. That's it. Now, here's the crazy thing. The Bengals defense actually did better without Trey Hendrickson this year. You don't believe me? Here are the stats. They were 4-5 without Trey Hendrickson, and they allowed 27.8 points per game, 378.7 total yards per game, 245.2 passing yards per game, 146 rushing yards per game. They had 2 sacks and a 59.7 defensive success rate. Now with Trey Hendrickson, they were 2-5 and they allowed 31.7 points per game, 409.6 total yards per game, 265.3 passing yards per game, 152.6 rushing yards per game. They averaged 1.5 sacks a game, 12.1 pressures per game, and a 55.1 defensive success rate, which is promising, but there's still room for growth. Now let's shift things over to the offense, okay? Here are some stats that show the Bengals offense with Joe Burrow and without Joe Burrow. Now with Joe Burrow, they were 5-2, and they averaged 28 points per game, 335 yards per game, 87 rushing yards per game, a 44.7% success rate, a 58.6 pass play percentage, and a 26.6 red zone touchdown percentage, which isn't bad. But here's the stats for the Bengals offense under Joe Flacco. So the record was 4-5, and they averaged 29.1 points per game, 356.9 yards per game, 267.2 passing yards per game, 102.2 rushing yards per game, a 47.7 success rate, and a 62.5% pass play percentage, as well as a 26.7% red zone touchdown percentage. Now, I know a lot of Bengals fans are a little butthurt right now with all the stats I just read, but the fact of the matter is this. You can make a strong point to keep Joe Flacco just in case Joe Burrow gets hurt again. Because I would venture to say, if you keep Joe Flacco, this team will stay afloat. We saw what he did with the Browns. We saw what he did with the Bengals when he first got there, those first maybe 3 or 4 weeks. Hell, we saw what he did against the Steelers on Thursday night. You don't think that's promising? You don't want that as your backup? If it was me personally, I would give Joe Flacco $10 million just to sit on the bench. And I know that's a little bit excessive, but he has something that can't be taught, and that's experience. And I think with his experience, I think it'll make someone like a Joe Burrow a whole lot better. Not saying that Joe Burrow is bad. Bengals fans, don't come in my DMs. Don't come in the comments and say, oh, you don't know anything about football. No, just listen to me, okay? When you look at that generation of quarterbacks, right, the pace of the game for them is completely different. The way that they're able to manipulate defenses is completely different. The knowledge that they have against different defensive coverages and different defensive coordinators and whatnot, I would pay a boatload of money just to have someone like that on my team because that can help you with the preparation for a lot of games. Now, with that being said, we have to talk about the run game because this is just my personal opinion. I could be completely wrong, but ever since Joe Mixon left the Bengals, their run game really hasn't been the same. Like, when Joe Mixon was with the Bengals, that was another person that you had to worry about not only in the rushing game, but in the receiving game as well. And since his departure, I mean, sure, you have Chase Brown. He's done a good job. Sure, you've had Samaje Perine. Sure, you've had Taj Brooks. You've had different people, but they don't replace what Joe Mixon did. So I decided to compare the stats of Joe Mixon's last year with Chase Brown, Samaje Perine, and Taj Brooks. So Chase Brown this year, 219 rushing attempts for 947 rushing yards, 4.3 rushing yards per carry, and 6 rushing touchdowns. Samaje Perine, 76 rushing attempts for 340 rushing yards, 4.5 rushing yards per carry, and 3 rushing touchdowns. Taj Brooks, 16 rushing attempts for 45 rushing yards and 2.8 rushing yards per carry. Joe Mixon's last year, 257 rushing attempts for 1,034 rushing yards, 9 rushing touchdowns, and had 4.1 rushing yards per carry. The proof is in the pudding here, folks. They missed Joe Mixon. Now, I understand that Joe Mixon is a different running back than those 3 running backs, but what I'm trying to get at is that the Bengals need to get back to having a really good run game. And the reason why I say that is because that eliminates Joe Burrow having to drop back 35, 45, maybe even 50 times a game just to put up 25 or 26 or 32 points. I think if the run game is good, you can control the pace of the game, control the time of possession game, and you're able to wear down on defenses. But if you continue to just throw darts at Jamar Chase and Mike Gesicki and T. Higgins, the defense ain't going to get tired. You're going to get tired because every single time that you score, your defense isn't going to do anything, and you have to go right back on the field. You don't believe me? Look up the stat. Now, what do they need to do? For starters, you have to start drafting better. And I'm talking about on offense and defense. And the reason why I say that is because as long as you're paying Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins all that money, you have to make everything else cheap. And I think as long as you do that, you're going to see the fruits of your labor compared to just keeping those 3 and just saying, oh, as long as we got those 3, everything's going to be fine. They're going to be the reason why we go to the Super Bowl. They're going to be the reason why we're going to have this dominant team for the next 5 to 10 years. No, you're not. You're not going to go anywhere. The next thing the Bengals need to do is find a new head coach. Granted, I understand they went to the Super Bowl with Zach Taylor. They went to multiple AFC championships with Zach Taylor. But right now, it would be best for both parties to just go their separate ways. Because what they have right now is not successful. And honestly, you're going to be the scapegoat, bro. So just go somewhere where you can maximize your potential instead of staying with this crappy team and this crappy organization and this crappy ownership group. I'm just being honest here. I understand that Zach Taylor gets a lot of flack. But we also need to direct a lot of that smoke to the ownership and to the front office of the Bengals. Because year after year after year, they continue to neglect the needs of this team and they continue to take the cheap way out. At some point, this isn't going to work. And at some point, people are going to want to leave. You can already start to feel that Joe Burrow maybe wants a new change of scenery. Now, am I saying he's going to just flat out request a trade this offseason? No. But I wouldn't be surprised if he's thought about it. Because think about it. I'm on a team that's not going to go anywhere. Trey Hendrickson is going to leave. The one time that I was actually outspoken about the organization, they gave me what I want, but at the same time, it came at the cost of me not showing up, me being hurt again, and us missing the playoffs again. So at some point, you just need to just admit it. This whole experiment is a failure. It was nice in those first 2 or 3 years where they actually had a defense and, the league didn't have an answer for Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Joe Burrow. It was nice. But guess what? Everybody has caught up to them. Everybody knows how to beat them. Let's just be honest, all right? Now the question is this. Do they stack or do they shed? And I would venture to say stack. Now I know that's probably not the best option, but at this point, you just have to stack with what you have. Granted, you have your quarterback, which is great. You have weapons. All you need to do is just finish what you started. Invest into the interior offensive line. Maybe get you another running back if you want to do that. And the rest of those draft picks, flood it with the defense. Whatever hole that you have on the defense, use all those picks for them. Now, granted, you have 6 draft picks, all right? You have your first, your second, your third, your fourth. You don't have a fifth. You have a sixth and a seventh. Now, you can do something with that. Now, the question is this. What is going to be your priority? Is it going to be the defense because there's a lot of good prospects on that side of the ball? Or are you going to do something with the offense? Or are you going to trade down? They have options. The question is, are they going to make the right decision? Because it is the Bengals, folks. Now, one move I would do if I was the Bengals GM is draft a defensive player, specifically an edge rusher. And the reason why I say that is because Trey Hendrickson isn't coming back. Sam Hubbard has retired. You need somebody to pair with Shamar Stewart. Now, you can get David Bailey. You can get Arvell Reese. You could get Mason Thomas. You get Peter Woods if you wanted to. You have options. And I would rather for this organization to invest into another pass rusher than to go after a corner or a safety or inside linebacker, because guess what? That pass rusher will be the reason why that quarterback thinks twice before they hike the ball. That pass rusher could be the reason why they seal the game. So for all the people that are saying, oh, go after Caleb Downs or go after this corner or go after this inside linebacker, blah, 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 blah. Stop it. Get you pass rusher, shut up. And with that being said, they're going to have $77.8 million in cap space, which is really good. Now, they could probably have more if they restructure some people's deals, move some money around, cut a few people, whatnot. You already know. But when we look at their free agents, of course, Trey Hendrickson, Joseph Asai, Ted Karras, Geno Stone, Joe Flacco, Noah Fant, Cam Taylor-Britt, Dalton Reisner, Tanner Hudson, Cameron Sample, Isaiah Foskey, just to name a few, right? Now, out of all of those people, who do you think the Bengals are going to bring back? It's not going to be Trey Hendrickson. And may not be Joseph Asai, maybe Cam Taylor-Britt, but I think he'll probably test free agency. Joe Flacco, maybe Noah Fant, I don't know, but only time will tell. So let's talk about the Chiefs. Yes, the Chiefs. I know everybody wants to talk about the Chiefs. Oh, is the era over? And I understand I was one of those people that said, yeah, the era is over for the Chiefs. They're not going to win any more Super Bowls, but I had to take a step back just to rethink what I said. And we're going to talk about that, all right? So what went wrong in their season? Lack of creativity, inconsistent offense and defense, and a lack of talent. Now, when we look at their season so far, they had the 17th ranked offense, and they averaged 21.9 points per game, 330.2 yards per game, 5.3 yards per play, and 38 touchdowns. They were 13th in passing offense, and they averaged 222.2 passing yards per game, 6 passing yards per play, and 23 passing touchdowns. They were 23rd in rushing offense, and they averaged 108 rushing yards per game, 4.2 rushing yards per play, and 15 rushing touchdowns. Now, defensively, they had the 10th ranked defense, and they allowed 19.6 points per game, 307.6 yards per game, 5.3 yards per play, and 32 touchdowns. They were 13th in passing defense, and they allowed 202.7 passing yards per game, 6.3 passing yards per play, and 18 passing touchdowns. They were 10th in rushing defense, and they allowed 104.9 rushing yards per game, 4 rushing yards per play, and 14 rushing touchdowns. So with that being said, let's be honest here. Over the last few years, we have started to see a decline in the Chiefs, specifically from a talent standpoint. And the reason why I say that is because once they traded away Tyreek Hill, nobody else has really stepped up. Sure, Travis Kelce is their most reliable weapon, but outside of him, who else is taking that next step? Is it Rashee Rice? Is it Xavier Worthy? Is it Juju Smith-Schuster? Is it Isaiah Pacheco? And the answer is nobody. Let's be honest here, okay? Even if they don't have the receivers, the one thing that the Chiefs offense can always rely on is the run game. And this year, that run game was non-existent. Now, sure, we can point fingers at Andy Reid or Matt Nagy or Patrick Mahomes or this person or that person or the janitor that only cleans the third floor on the left side, but the fact of the matter is this. In order for the Chiefs to go back to being dominant, They have to start hitting on their draft picks. It's time out for going after these shifty small wide receivers. You need to start bringing in some big body receivers that are good with contested catches. I understand that the whole move with Tyreek Hill and McCole Hardman and Sammy Watkins and this person, that person was cool, but guess what? That time has passed. You need to start bringing in some big dudes. You need to start going after someone like a George Pickens, someone like a DK Metcalf. Those are going to be the type of receivers that are going to hold up the entire season instead of going after that small, shifty receiver that can run a 4.2. You drafted one in the first round with Xavier Worthy. What has he done? Has he taken that next step that you can feel comfortable in saying that he's the number one wide receiver? I don't think so. I would venture to say he's probably wide receiver 2 in my book. Can you rely on Juju at this point? No, you can't. So at some point, they have to do something if they want to remain competitive. Now, am I saying they're going to have to go through this multi-year rebuild and get rid of this person, that person, even though I said it on the podcast and I'm sorry for that? No, they don't. Instead, you need to invest young and cheap talent into this team, especially on the defense. There's a chance that the Chiefs may lose Trent McDuffie in free agency. What is your contingency plan if that happens? Are you comfortable with Chris Jones right now? Are you comfortable with George Karlaftis right now? Because let's be honest here. If somebody called for Chris Jones and they're willing to give up a first-round pick for him, you're not going to take that call? If somebody called for George Karlaftis and they're saying we're willing to give up a second and maybe a really good player for him, you're not going to take that call? Because I would. Because at this point, you need to surround the star with young and cheap talent. That's the only way this thing is going to work. Now, granted, next year's draft class is very promising with pass rusher. So technically speaking, you could go and get your replacement next year. Now, am I saying he's going to have the same impact as a Chris Jones? No. But what I am saying is this. If you want to move off of him, next year is the year to do it. Now, with that being said, I think we can all agree that the Chiefs are going to stack. And the reason why I say that is because the foundation is still intact. It's just you have to continue to build off of it. And sure, that may take some time, but that's okay. I think if you're down for like 2 or 3 years, but then you're back up for another 5 or 6 years, who's really complaining? Hell, the Patriots did it. There was a point in time where the Patriots were not going to the AFC Championship, let alone Super Bowls for a period of time. It happens. It's a natural cycle. But the question is this, what are you going to do in that moment? Are you really going to start hitting on your draft picks? Are you going to refine yourself? Are you going to find that edge? Because at this point, and this is no shot at Andy Reid, but I think his offense has lost that edge, that juice, that creativity that we love seeing year after year after year. Now, am I saying that Andy Reid is washed? No. But whatever he needs to do it. Find that edge. Find that creativity that gave you an advantage over every single defense that you went up against. Because that's the only way that you're going to go back to being on the mountaintop. Now, with that being said, you're going to have 6 draft picks. You're going to have your first, your second, your third, your fourth, and 2 fifth-round picks. Not bad. Sure, you can have a little bit more, but it is what it is. Now, the one move I would do, and Steelers fans, this is very controversial. And Chiefs fans, this is very controversial. So hear me out. I'm trading for Pat Freiermuth. I'm just going to let that breathe for a moment. Good? Everybody's done saying oohs and ahs? All right, cool, good. And the reason why I say that is because the Steelers are not utilizing Pat Freiermuth. I'm going to go to a quarterback that's going to utilize me. Look at George Pickens. George Pickens with Dak Prescott looks like one of the best wide receivers in the league right now. I want that. I have the skill to do that. So if I'm Pat Freiermuth, hey, I love you guys. I love Pittsburgh. I love my time being here. But to hell with y'all, I'm going to Mahomes. And even when you look at his contract is easy to take on. His base salary this upcoming season, $7.6 million. His cap hit, $11.2 million. In 27, $8.5 million for a base salary. A cap hit of $12.1 million. In 28, $6.8 million with a cap hit of $10.4. That is the perfect replacement for Travis Kelce. I'm sorry. I'll give up a second-round pick for Pat Freiermuth. I may even have to give up a first-round pick for Pat Freiermuth. Now, I know that's a little bit excessive, but the reason why I'm saying go after Pat Freiermuth is because he's a veteran, he's proven, and if you get Pat Freiermuth, it's going to unlock something in this offense. With that being said, when we look at their cap space, they're going to have negative $40.5 million. Now, I understand everyone's freaking out. Oh my God, what are they going to do? They don't have no cap space. What are they going to do? Look at the Saints. The Saints, every single year going into the offseason, don't have no cap space. And then they nickel and dime. They pinch here. They pinch there. They restructure this. They cut this person and they'll sign them again. They'll cut this person. They'll trade this person away. And the next thing you know, they're going to have cap space. It's the same thing with the Chiefs. All they have to do is restructure Patrick Mahomes' contract, move some money around for Chris Jones, move some money around for George Karlaftis, and you're fine. And when we look at their free agents, of course, Travis Kelce, Hollywood Brown, Jerry Tillery, Kareem Hunt, Brian Cook, Juju Smith-Schuster, Derek Nandi, Leo Chanel, Deion Bush, Mike Edwards, Gardner Minshew, Tyquan Thornton, just to name a few. Out of all those people, who are you going to bring back? Because honestly speaking, you can upgrade from having Hollywood Brown. You can upgrade from having Brian Cook and Juju Smith-Schuster and Derek Nandi and Leo Chanel. If you're the Chiefs, you can still sign some people, but at the same time, like I've said in the earlier part of this segment, fill this team up with young and cheap talent. Cheap talent. If you do that, I guarantee you'll be right back to where you once were a couple years ago. Now let's talk about the final team, and that is the Dolphins. So, what went wrong in their season? And that is inconsistent quarterback play, bad roster construction, and just inconsistent offensive and defensive play. Now, when we look at their stats so far, they have the 21st ranked defense, and they've allowed 24.1 points per game, 342 yards per game, 5.7 yards per play, and 42 touchdowns. They were 18th in pass defense, and they allowed 216.5 passing yards per game, 6.5 yards per play, and 28 passing touchdowns. They were 24th in run defense, and they allowed 125.5 rushing yards per game, 4.6 rushing yards per play, and 14 rushing touchdowns. They had the 25th ranked offense, and they averaged 21.1 points per game, 308.3 yards per game, 5.5 yards per play, and 36 touchdowns. They were 25th in passing offense, and they averaged 184.4 passing yards per game, 6 passing yards per play, and 22 passing touchdowns. They were 19th in rushing offense, and they averaged 123.8 rushing yards per game, 4.9 rushing yards per play, and 14 rushing touchdowns. Let's start with the offense. Sure, we know the offense has been inconsistent this entire season, but there is some promise. And the reason why I say that is because when they started to rely on the run game, that's when you started to see this offense be really productive. But when they started to rely on the pass game, that's when you know bad things were going to happen. Now, can we put blame on Tua? Yes. But we also need to put blame on the coaching staff as well as the personnel. Because everybody has a hand to play on why this offense wasn't good. Sure, we can say Tyreek Hill should be on the field, and sure, Jalen Waddle needs to step up and do this and do that, but that little stretch where they were winning games and they beat the Bills and they beat the Commanders and this team and that team, it was nice. But guess what? They weren't going to make it in the playoffs. They weren't going to go to the Super Bowl. They wasn't going to go anywhere this year. Now, when we talk about the defense, however, sure, they were okay in spurts, but consistently, they were not that good. And that was expected because they didn't have a lot of playmakers on that side of the ball. Sure, Minka Fitzpatrick was having a good season. Sure, Bradley Chubb was doing his thing. Zach Sealer was doing his thing every once in a while. But outside of them, and maybe Jordan Brooks, who else could you say really stepped up? Who else could you say took that next step in the right direction? Josh Robinson, Jack Jones, Kenneth Grant, Zach Sealer? They were okay, but they didn't take that next step to say, oh man, I can't wait to see what's going to happen next season. They're showing a lot of promise. I'm okay with this. You didn't get that reception from this side of the ball. Instead, they were okay. Now, if you have low standards, sure, you're okay with that. But if you have high standards, you're not satisfied with that. Now, can we blame this on the coaching? Sure. Could we blame this on Chris Greer? Sure. But this team was not going to go anywhere this year. Now, with that being said, what do they need? For starters, they need a veteran head coach. They need a good GM. And they need productive players. So with the veteran head coach, you need a culture builder. You need somebody that has a high standard of excellence. Because what you have right now is not sustainable. Granted, Mike McDaniel stepped up. He put his balls on the table and he said, you know what? I'm not going to do this no more. We're going to do things my way or the highway. But it was too late. You should have had this attitude the moment that you stepped foot in the Dolphins organization. But you didn't do it. You want to try to get along with everybody and be supportive. That's okay at spurts. But at the end of the day, sometimes you need to get in somebody's ass. You need to tell them, hey, listen, you ain't been playing well. Either you play well or somebody else is going to take your spot. Simple as that. Now, some people can handle that and other people can't. And that's okay. Now, sure, you could probably try, and I don't know if this is going to work or not, but you could try to get a Mike Tomlin. You could try to get a John Harbaugh if they're available. But realistically speaking, maybe Vance Joseph. Maybe. I understand he's a defensive minded head coach, but maybe. Mike McCarthy comes to mind, maybe, if he wants to take that job. I just feel like personally, if you're a veteran head coach, you have to think twice before you take this job because most likely Devon Achane will be gone. Jalen Waddle may be on the move. Minka Fitzpatrick may be on the move. You may have to deal with Tua for maybe a year. Are you willing to do that? Because that's a lot to take on. And on top of that, you're not going to have a lot of cap space. So when you factor all these things in, do you really want to take this on? Because this may hurt your credibility. And this isn't going to be an overnight fix. This is going to be a 3 to 5, maybe 3 to 6 year process. And that's if you're hitting on your draft picks and developing your players well and not making boneheaded moves. That's a lot to take on. Now with the GM part, you need somebody that can build a team. Don't just get the really cool, flashy GM that everybody is talking about. Get the GM that you know has a track record of building some really good teams. Not a good team that's just good for 2 or 3 years. You want a dominant team. You want somebody that's good at drafting, that's frugal when it comes to spending, and understands and values the right positions on the team. Now, when it comes to the productive player part, you're going to have to get that in the draft. Free agency is not going to be your best friend for a long time because nobody wants to come to a crappy team that's not winning. Now, sure, you could throw a boatload of money at people, but at some point, they're not going to want to stay there. Some people are going to value championships and winning more than just having a fat paycheck. And when it comes to stack or shed, you're going to have to shed this thing. And the reason why I say that is because the current structure that you have right now is not sustainable for long-term success. You need to clean your books, which is going to take some time, and you need to get more draft picks. And the only way that you can do that is start trading away assets. I would trade away Jalen Waddle. I would trade away anybody else that has value. And then from that point on, you make this team as cheap as possible. One move I would do is go after Mike Tomlin. And the reason why I say that is because we have seen him within the last few years have competitive rosters without a franchise quarterback. That's a major feat in itself. That is something that not a lot of coaches have been able to do. Now, granted, we can all get on him about the playoff success and all that other stuff, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. But how is it that somebody without a franchise quarterback has been able to beat the Ravens 9 times out of 10? Really think about that for a second. Since Ben Roethlisberger, he's had Kenny Pickett, Mitchell Trubisky, Mason Rudolph, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, and now Aaron Rodgers. And he still finds a way to stay in the thick of things when it comes to the playoffs. Now the question is this: what would it take to get someone like a Mike Tomlin? A first, a second and a player, a third and a player? I would pay it. Look at Mike Vrabel and the Patriots. First year, they looked really good. You wouldn't want that on your team? Meek Mill said it best: scare money don't make no money. So if you're really serious about winning, you would make this move. I don't care if you got to call Omar Khan every single day just to entertain this idea. Do it. Because I guarantee you guys are going to start winning. And let's look at their free agents. So they have Afitu Melifanu, Larry Borum, Liam Eichenberg, Darren Waller, Elijah Campbell, Rasul Douglas, Artie Burns, KJ Britt, Willie Gay Jr., Alex Madison, Dwayne Eskridge, just to name a few. Now, honestly speaking, who are you bringing back? Because I wouldn't bring back anybody. And if you do, it's only for competition in the summer. Outside of that, I'm just wiping the slate clean. I'm getting some young, cheap talent, and I'm just going to be on the trash roller coaster. It may take me a while, but hey, hopefully on the other side, you're going to start winning. But I'm going to end this episode here. If you guys like what you're listening, please make sure you guys leave a 5-star review on anywhere and everywhere that you listen to podcasts, okay? We are available on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else that you can listen to podcasts, okay? But if you want to access those places, go on Google, type in rss.com, Football Junkies Podcast. It should be the first link. And when you click on that link, it'll give you access to a plethora of different places that you can find us on, okay? Now for my YouTube people, like, share, subscribe, turn the notification bell on, leave a comment down below. Let me know your thoughts on anything and everything that I have talked about in this episode. Am I right? Am I wrong? Let's talk about it. Let's debate about it. By the way, thank you to everybody that's been subscribing to the YouTube. Believe it or not, the YouTube has actually been blowing up lately, and I just have to thank you guys for that, okay? Now, when you go on our YouTube, Football Junkies Pod, there is a link tree. When you click on that link tree, it'll take you to anywhere and everywhere that we have Football Junkies content, okay? Whether that be on the TikTok, the Instagram, Blue Sky, Twitter, and anywhere else, all right? Now, for my Instagram people, Football_Junkies Pod, all right? Football_Junkies Pod. Junkies Pod is not what? It is together, not spaced, okay? It is together, not spaced. Football_Junkies Pod. Now on Twitter, GM Kale. GM Kale. It's the same thing as Blue Sky. GM Kale. Kaile. Now for my TikTok people, Football Junkies Pod. Football Junkies Pod. I got some clips. I'm going to post them. Give me some time, all right? So as always, I hope I gave you guys the fix that you guys need. I love you guys. I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you guys so much for listening to the first episode of the Stack and Shed series. There's more to come. Just give me some time. NFC is next, so stay tuned for that. As always, this is your GM Kale signing out. Peace and love. Later, guys.